My father was a poet, a Yiddish poet, and I was brought up thinking that art was the most important thing in the world. Art is poetry, art is music, and we even had Van Gogh reproductions in my house, and my father even took me to the Metropolitan. But of course I thought that all visual artists were dead men of foreign origin and that I would probably grow up to be a poet, or a writer, or a journalist, or an English teacher, or a dishwasher of my husband's and children's dishes, or whatever. But when I was about 14 years old, for some strange reason there were two Botticellis in the Museum of Modern Art. The Primavera and whoever she is coming out of the ocean, Venus on a half shell. I saw my first art by myself. I saw those Botticellis, and I remember particularly the Botticellis and the Picassos. They did something to me. I got so excited. I ran around back and forth, back and forth. I seemed to be seeing something, thinking something, feeling something. When I look back on it, I think it was probably sexual. It was probably some sort of adolescent experience that became involved with those paintings that was so exciting. It was the most excited I had ever been in my whole life. But it never occurred to me at that time that I could make or would make pictures. I just became very interested in painting. And after that, I went very often to museums and saw many paintings. And I continued to be a literature major or an anthropology major or a writer or an editor of my school paper. I did all those things. Journalism, I guess, is where I thought I was going. But then, as I became a young college student, I began to meet people who were about 5 or 6 years older than I was, who were painters. And it seemed terribly exciting to me that there were people who were actually making these wonderful things that I was going to museums to see. And Nell Blaine, who was one of the first group of painters that I met, she was one of the original Jane Street Gallery people, gave a class for 3 of her friends, and that was me and Jane Frolicker and Larry Rivers, and one other person who is long forgotten, but 3 of the 4 of us became artists. And we studied with Nell for a year, and Nell was a fascinating woman. She could talk, her voice when she talked about art was so beautiful. She made it so exciting. Her life seemed so exciting. I also heard my first Billie Holiday I was a high school senior at that time. It was my entrance into the adult world. These people were in their early 20s, but to me it seemed they were grown-ups. They didn't live with their mother and father. Nell was even married. Can you believe anything so grown-up? She was a painter. And after a week of Saturday classes, Nell said to us, if you want to learn any more, you have to go to Hans Hofmann. And at this time, it was all in the hobby. I mean, it was not anything that I thought people really did. It was just too interesting to not do. And then after I had been with Hofmann for about 3 months, he offered me a scholarship. I was in the night school because I was going to college. By that time, I was a freshman or a sophomore at Hunter College, where I ultimately majored in anthropology. And I began to be the monitor of the night class, which meant that I came early every day, opened the doors, posed the model, collected the money, swept the floor, and had free tuition. That kept me going because it didn't cost me any money, and it was terribly, terribly exciting. Because I had grown up with a very brilliant man who was my father, and I enjoyed the intellectual stimulation of being around a very, very special person. So there I was, and I was getting better and better at it. I was fortunate enough because I knew Yiddish to understand Hofmann. A lot of people couldn't understand his heavy German, but I did. I understood his language, and I guess I sort of became a star. That's how I got my scholarship. And I still never thought I would be an artist, but after about 2 years of doing this 5 nights a week, and then going to the summer school every summer in Provincetown, I suddenly noticed that everybody to the left and right of me were calling themselves artists. And it suddenly occurred to me that maybe you didn't have to be a dead Frenchman or Italian to be an artist. And I began to sort of very hesitantly think that I might want to be an artist. And it also seemed like a big revolution to me. I didn't realize that I was following in my father's footsteps. I thought I was inventing a whole new life. Painting was very exciting in New York at that time. You could go down to the Waldorf cafeteria right around the corner from the Hofmann School, and you could meet de Kooning and Franz Klein and Karl Knatz. And they would make fun of us, of the Hoffman students, and they would say, well, teach us about space. And I was a very smart alecky kid, so I would sit down, I would explain to them about space. And they liked me because I was serious. And I got to know a lot of painters, and they were by far the most interesting people in New York at that time. And doing it was very, very interesting. And then when I graduated from Hunter College, I decided that I would go to Berkeley because Hoffman students were teaching there. He told me I should go and study there. And that's why I went there, and was very disappointed in the department. That was a bad year. It was the year of the loyalty oath. It was an unfortunate year in Berkeley. But still, I was doing it. I was doing it, I was doing it, I was doing it. I kept on doing it, I kept on doing it, I kept on doing it. I got married, I had children, I kept on doing it, I kept on doing it. I began to show. What can I say? I found I was just doing it. I think I started out, I was a lover of modernism. I loved those Botticellis, and I loved the Picassos, and ultimately Matisse became, and Bonnard, of course, and many other artists. De Kooning was a big influence on me. He was a teacher of mine, actually, from coming to my studio and my going to his studio. People were very generous with their time in the days when there was no money in the art world, and were always very anxious to welcome young people who seemed serious. As I say, I was always a bit more conservative than the modernists that I knew. I always thought, wait a minute, I'm going to become abstract, but first I got to do what I'm doing. Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. And I really fell in love with the French painting of the 20th century and even the late 19th century, starting with Monet, really Matisse, Bonnard, Picasso, Léger. Anyway, as I say, I kept doing it. I thought I was going to end up abstract. I don't know what end up meant, but it seemed that that was where we were going. That's where Hoffman told us we were going. But I was too much in love with real light and real color and real objects and the effect of light on things. Ultimately, I became really involved with color. And I think what has happened to me is that after my very, very many years as a painter, I am now probably one of the most conservative painters alive because I am conserving the skills of drawing and painting as they were evolved in the School of Paris, which seems to me was really a return somehow to pre-Renaissance, to Byzantine understanding of the structure of the surface of the picture. Also, I think it's important to remember the technology. A lot of people talk about the evolution of art as though the invention of the camera had nothing to do with the loss of painting as a tool in certain areas like portraiture. But still, art has always been, in the Western world, like poetry, it's been a repository of the thought of some of the most brilliant minds in the human race. And the culture is very, very rich. And if we can preserve some of it in the face of the growing visual technology, the film certainly the greatest filmmakers have been influenced by painting, and probably the greatest filmmakers will influence painting. Whether paintings even need to be made by hand anymore, when there are all those wonderful, wonderful cameras that can go and take great fields of Africa and then narrow down and show you how a cockroach lays an egg. I mean, there's an incredible visual culture in our time. But still, that which is most human, that which goes through the eye and through the hand, has been retained to a very large extent in painting. So as I say, although I began as a sort of a moderate radical in the sense that I studied with Hoffman, and my teachers in Hunter College thought I was wildly radical, I think I have become a conservative, and I think that my role in painting will be that I may be the last person who remembers about all those old-fashioned things. Of course, the work, the visual culture is what's important to me, but I have to say that it was originally meeting people like Nell Blaine and Lee Bell and Bob De Niro, the painter. It was meeting extremely interesting people that got me to study and be involved in it. They were the most interesting people that I could have met at that time, being such an art-centered teenager because of my upbringing. And I have met interesting people in my life through painting, so I don't object to that, but it's certainly not what's the most important thing. Right now I'm very fortunate. I have for the past 10 years made my living as a painter with only occasional teaching. I was a teacher of painting for about 20 years. Before that I taught in the public schools for a while. Right this year I have a grant, I have an NEA. I've had other grants. I do sell my work. It's bloody, it's a bloody fight, but I am alive, so I guess I do survive on my work. When I first got involved with art, it was a very sort of a cloistered world. No one expected to make a living from art. De Kooning worked as a sign painter. Elaine de Kooning worked as a welder to support him sometimes so he could stop painting signs. We had sort of chosen ourselves as a secret priesthood. We were nuts. We were all paranoids. We were a minority culture of maybe 30 or 40 people. Terribly, terribly interesting, terribly, terribly involved in what we were doing, and terribly, terribly cooperative since there was no money. When money appeared, it happened first on 10th Street. I remember how shocked I was when I first got to 10th Street and saw Norman Bloom wearing a three-piece suit. People started wearing three-piece suits. People were coming down from uptown to pick out work. At that time, I was not very active. I had a few rather inactive years as a painter because my babies were very young. When they were between the ages of 0 and maybe 5, although I actually had a couple of shows and continued to paint, I was not really as active in the art world because I was quite simply home a lot. And as a matter of fact, that was true for several years after that. As I say, I continued to paint, but I, for a while, lost my participation in the community of artists because I simply didn't get out that much. But as money appeared in art, cooperation ended and competition began. People who liked your work wouldn't necessarily give you the collector or give you the gallery. That was given to someone who could do the same for them. That was the politicalization of art. You know, right now I'm going through a stage of really hating my painting, which is something that has happened to me very frequently. I always say that artists have accordion egos. It's either very big or very small. This year I did work which is rather different from the work that I have done most of my life. I've been copying El Greco. I began in a real crisis to copy the El Greco, which had to do with reading Arthur Dante. And he struck a chord. When he talked about art being dead, when he talked about Warhol as a phenomenon of degeneracy, although he doesn't phrase it that way, he claims he likes Warhol, but the way I read it, I read Warhol as a phenomenon of the degeneracy of the art world, of painting and drawing. That's what I love. I love what you do by hand. Conceptual art is not very interesting to me. I think the real conceptual artists are the writers. Right now, I guess I'm pretty good. I like some of my old pictures. It's a constant struggle. It's a constant struggle. I often think that my greatest strength as a painter, I have been told, critics say that I have a good hand. John Russell says I have the lightest hand in the business. And that comes from the abstract expressionism, which was really, I am a sort of a second generation New York painter. We come from abstract expressionism, and the hand is very important. And I know I have a very light hand, and I know that I'm a colorist, and I know that my work is poetic. It's often been told that. But I often feel that my work was dependent on the highly critical audience of those 30 painters who were the most important American painters of our time. Those people are dying. Those people are living in Connecticut and New Jersey. We don't have the community of artists. I don't see them in the Cedar Bar. Do they come to my shows? Yes, not necessarily to the openings. I am painting more and more in a vacuum, although I still have a few close friends who come and see my work and whose studios I go to. But literally, some of them just live too far away. And more and more of them, unfortunately, are dying. Ray Parker just died a few weeks ago. He will be a very great loss to me as just an eye. He kept my color pure. Anyway, I went into this El Greco thing because I thought if art is dead, because as Arthur Dante says, art is dead, And I saw terrible things in the galleries, disgraceful things in the galleries. Maybe it is dead. It's happened in the world. It happened in Florence for 200 years and then it stopped. It happened in the School of Paris, which died after World War II. Why shouldn't it happen even faster in this country when I saw the infusion of money and the enormous corruption that happened? The cousinship, the favor doing, the sleeping with, the high-bornness of the people who did well in the art world. It's actually a social thing now. It's if you're a Rockefeller or a Whitney, it helps. But it didn't start that way, but it's that way now. So in this great despair, I thought, since I'd already been copying Bonnard because I wanted to learn another hand, and my Bonnard copies were, of course, much freer. Well, of course, so are my El Greco copies. But when I began to copy El Greco, I thought to myself, I was thinking of a curator who was allowed to play with the Velázquezes, and I thought, they're never going to let me play with the El Grecos. But I can do what I want to do. I can make my own El Grecos and play with them. And I want to spend the rest of my life just doing what I want to do, which is really just learning how to paint, because if painting is dying, at least I'm going to have the pleasure, except that I do have a few collectors who buy a painting from time to time, and I get a grant from time to time, and I show quite regularly when I really want to. But still, I am not Andy Warhol, and I am not David Hockney, and I am not a household word. So why don't I just spend the rest of my life studying painting? And I began with the El Grecos. Now, the thing about El Greco is that he's really much better than me. I've enjoyed doing it, but now I have to go do something else. I have to look at nature again. I've been looking at art more and more for the past few years. Also, I have a concept, which I feel that I'm unable to, well, at this moment, is, okay, this is what I'm heading toward. You know the late Cézannes, which are the bathers, how those wonderful bodies have such an asexual and almost impersonal quality. And they remind me very much of the films that I see on TV of animals by watering holes, the giraffes, the lions, the tigers. Somehow I feel that what Cézanne really got in those late pictures is the human horde, the animals by the watering hole, something very basically human. Because there's always the question of why do you take off your clothes? Is it a whorehouse? Is it a boudoir? Is it an art school? Is it the baths or whatever? But suddenly what's really important about the human body is the fact that it's the basic animal. And I would like to do something like that. I see how Cézanne did it. Cézanne was like me. He was a struggler. He was not Renoir. He did not have that enormous facility. And I would like to do that. I think I might go back to my Negril paintings, which were done from a high vantage, and I could see the coast and the land and the houses and even some people in them. Somehow, something about the man by the edge of the water, or the man, the woman, the child, I don't know, something about that human horde, which is where I want to go. And I think that my El Grecos were sort of a stop in that direction, because Cézanne was unskillful in his understanding of perspective, but basically skillful in his rendering of an image that no one has ever made. I mean, the interweaving of the human body and nature in such a basic animal way is very profound. Anyway, I'm working with people now. I've worked from a few models. I have some. This is a Charles Street series which I began 30 years ago. This is related to it, which is basically 3 figures done in different styles. They all tell different stories. Somehow I'm going to something. I also saw those, being always a great lover of Matisse, I was just in the Modern, and I saw the swimming pool with those blue figures and the white jumping out. And also they seemed to me to have, they struck me, they never were my favorite Matisses before, but I've been looking at the music and the dance, which were, in a sense, Matisse's efforts to use the human body in a profound way in the end of his life. And I saw the swimming pool, and I remember somehow the body at the edge of the water. And I think that maybe that's where I want to go, but I don't know how. Well, what do you do when you wake up in the morning? You go into the studio. What motivated me to paint years ago is different from what motivates me to paint today. What motivates me to paint today is because that's my ongoing process that I care about. I have, of course, my dry spells, which are very painful to me, but that's it. The dry spells are so painful that I just have to come out of them. No, I'm not satisfied with what's happened to me in my career, and if I could change something that I've done, I would have been a less snotty young girl. I was very snotty. I did not have respect for powerful figures. I treated them rudely, and I messed up many opportunities. I have since learned better, but it's not as open a world to me as it was when I was a snotty young girl. I would have a better career if I had understood career as a young painter. That's the only thing I would change. The thing that is satisfying is that when I finally achieve balance in a painting that I've been working on for a long time, that's when I fall in love with my painting. That's when it seems to me that the painting that I just made is the single most beautiful painting in the world. There's a point in the painting process when it all goes very deliciously and very sensuously and very well, and those are just wonderful experiences. Nothing takes their place. In the 70s, we began with pluralism. What pluralism really meant was art schoolism. You get people who have a degree in shaped canvases. You say, what do you do? And they say, I have an MA in shaped canvases. Whatever it is they learned from the teacher, when you began to have a less motivated art student, as the art schools grew, as people who failed French went into the art department, as, the sort of the weak one in the rich litter of the rich family was shoveled into art when they came out of the nut house or whatever. We had pluralism, which meant people went to art school, whatever that teacher taught them was what they made for the rest of their lives. So now we have this sort of pluralistic aesthetic, which really means, and also right now there's an aesthetic very much for not the look of the hand. At least that's what I saw in Castelli a lot this year. The machine-made object. But I think that what's really happening in the art world now is a dissolution of the body of art. I think it's temporary. I think it exists in the museums. It exists in the best painters. It's not that there are not good painters today. It's that there are so many bad painters that it's harder to find the good ones in the haystack. And the ones that are the most visible are not necessarily the best, or even for that matter, the painters. I could tell you some stories that are very shocking, but they're X-rated. But I think that will change, but I think it will change very slowly, because we now have a situation where the tail is wagging the dog. That is, the art market is wagging the artist. But of course there will be, in 20 years, there'll be a new bunch of skull crashers. They'll come along and, it's a generational thing, kill the daddy. So this thing will also be destroyed. I don't know whether I will live to see it, but it will fall. Babylon will fall. I prefer a painterly aesthetic. I prefer an aesthetic aesthetic. The museum that my dealer Barbara Ingber is now forming is a museum of art for art's sake, for aesthetic art. It's become a bad word now to say that your ambitions in your painting are aesthetic. You must say that they are political. You must say that you are fighting injustice, or you're fighting AIDS, or you're fighting South Africa. I don't know. And it's irrelevant. I mean, you have these people with these nice pieces of wood from Brazil, and they say they're protecting the environment in Brazil because they took some pieces of wood and put it in a gallery. It's a sort of a chic kind of politicalization, which is denigrating to both art and politics, as far as I'm concerned. I like the aesthetic moment, that poetic moment, when, it's really a religious experience. Art is religious. In our culture, it is anyway. Whatever religious means, which is another question. But it's got to do with a feeling of order out of chaos, a feeling of unity with other creatures, that euphoria which is spiritual, which comes through prayer. Painting is a form of prayer, and you can also find it, some people find it from looking at art. People have been known to go crazy in Florence. People who have gotten to Florence and seen too many paintings too fast have gotten so excited that they've begun to become manic or to delude. Art is very powerful. And it's the power that art has, the spiritual power that art has for me, that I like the most about it. In the long run, in 100 years, I think that what has happened in this country is that from being really a very marginal occupation, painting, in the 1930s and 40s, just like on the coasts, maybe both coasts or whatever, suddenly become a very major industry in this country. The too rapid growth, and particularly the too rapid teaching, you have people teaching who just got out of school and never even learned anything, has been, in the short run, a deteriorating influence on the level of art. However, the fact that there is much more art being produced means that ultimately there will be more critical eyes, so that I think that in 100 years we might become like Japan. We might become a completely aesthetic nation from the growth of art. But that right now we're going through sort of like a rough middle stage where there's really a lot of vulgarity out there. I would like to do the human horde kind of painting that I talked about. I don't know if I'll ever achieve it, but it's what I'm thinking about now. The first thing I'm going to do is, now that I've done the El Grecos, the Laocoons, which are more interesting to me than when I did the Madonna, because I noticed that they had the wide town behind it. They had the wide space, which reminded me of my Negril paintings, which were a wide space. And they also had the human action. Now, of course, that's a Renaissance perspective, the very large pictures and the perspectival town behind it. I don't know if I really want to use that sort of thing. The Cézannes, where the foliage and the human beings are sort of more interwoven into a more sort of Byzantine surface, is certainly closer to what I want to do. On the other hand, I don't really want to do that either. So I'm not quite sure exactly, but I know that I am heading in. I may just do some portraits or have some models next.